Without further ado, I would like to hand the stage over to Amanda. Let's welcome her to Benchmark 16.
Hello. I'm not a technical person, so I'm sat there going, okay, I've got to understand my customer experience. I'm not sure our customers really want the experience that they get from us. And also how you would recommend our service, which people do, and I'll explain kind of how they do, but a lot of people really don't want anything to do with us, to be fair. What I'll quickly go through in sort of the 20 minutes I've got is what we've done with social media. We have very little money, as you can imagine. I'll do my old public sector's got no money. Thanks to Theresa May, we have got less money than we ever used to have. My team's a lot smaller than it was, so everything that we're trying to do around communications is very much focused on no cost, low cost, and trying to use the digital and social media kind of world that's developed to maximum effect, and I'll explain how. So for us back in 2010, up until that point for about 2-3 years, we've been using social media, mainly mainly Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Bebo and MySpace. And we also, all we did was just push RSS feeds of information from the website, and believe me, all you got, if you ever followed us, there was a few thousand people that did, was just the death and destruction that happens on a daily basis on the streets of Greater Manchester and all the appeals for information that we needed, but that was it. We started to see in 2010, we could see opportunities there, so what we did was what we called our kind of first social media strategy. It was very much focused around what the organisation needed and where we were going, which was very focused around neighbourhoods and communities and trying to maximise kind of how we could get and keep that kind of contact with communities, even though we're about 2,000 officers smaller now than we were back in 2010, and we knew that was what we were going to have to face. We also did a piece of buzz monitoring because we thought that people were obviously talking about policing and policing-related issues, and that we weren't connecting with them. So we got a piece of research done for us, which identified kind of where the biggest conversations were. Unsurprisingly, still one of the biggest conversations people will have randomly about policing is football. So there was lots of like fan sites and various other things that were having conversations, and that helped us then to formulate kind of what we wanted to do. So we developed what we called our first social media strategy, and then took that to the then Chief Constable, took it to the senior team, and said, this is what we want to do. We want to move from being a broadcast to being engaging, to try and get links in with people. We can see big opportunities for officers. And they agreed it, which is probably because they didn't realise what they were agreeing to. But what they'd effectively signed up to then was us rolling out social media to the front line. And that's where I think our biggest benefits have come, and I'll kind of go through that with some examples in a minute. We've got about 101 accounts. There's a few that we hold corporately, but the vast majority are held on a geographic kind of neighbourhood basis. And we train officers, PCSOs, and police staff, and they will develop the engagement on that really local level. We get some really good feedback around that. We've now got the best part of 500-600 people who've got that level of social media knowledge and experience. It's a few hours we do with them, and people often say, surely it'd be the young officers that come in that are the best at using social media, and it's not. The best people we generally find who can grasp kind of the benefits of social media are the older officers who know how to have a conversation, and we just teach them how to use the technology. That's one of the biggest things, is just having that right tone, and we do a lot. We've always worked on a 90-10 rule. 90% of what we do is fine, 10% will appear in the Daily Mail, and it does. And that's fine, and we've said from the start to the bosses, you can't get people to do this as an additional. They don't get anything extra for it, other than, lots of cakes if they ever come in the office. You've got to cut them some slack, as long as the 10% isn't because they've done anything deliberate, and it never is. The vast majority of the problems we have, and if any of you, and there's lots of examples of it, is where officers think they've got a sense of humour, which they generally have, and it probably works well for the area that they're kind of engaging with, but then the media see it and they don't like it. So we've kept that even when we've had some quite nasty headlines. And the other thing for us with all this was we built in a risk management so that the bosses could feel confident. There was a flow chart which said if somebody does this, we'll do this. If somebody says that, we'll do that. That said, we never really kind of stuck to it, but it just made them feel better that we thought through kind of what people would say to us. And surprisingly, and you probably, I don't know if you've ever thought about what we see on a daily basis on police accounts, we don't get that many that are just abuse. We do get one or two people that's just abuse, but we don't get as many as we probably thought we were going to. And the other big thing for us was about making sure that we could show the benefits so that we could see through kind of the ongoing monitoring that we were going to do, but particularly evaluation that we built in, that we could see a benefit because we just haven't got the time and the money and the people to do something if we can't see something tangibly coming back. Big issues for us, massive challenges, trying to keep up to date. Public sector and definitely police IT is about as old as they come. We're still using one of the systems that another force binned off about 15, 20 years ago, and we're just about replacing it. So, you know, it's difficult. What we tend to do within the team and what we're trying to do with officers now is make sure that we've got equipment that we can use. We've relied for the best part of the last 5 or 6 years on them using their own machines and using their own devices to actually make it happen, because you couldn't do on the Blackberries that we were given. So we just made that. We just built a kind of process and policy around it, and there's no point fighting it. A huge amount of demand that comes through, but also risks and vulnerability. A big issue for us is around people making themselves vulnerable by what they post. And we've had lots of occasions where people have posted, particularly on sort of Facebook, that they're a victim of domestic abuse when they're looking for help. And we need, obviously, not to have outed themselves in that kind of way. So we do a lot around trying to make sure people are aware of the kind of risks and vulnerability that they put themselves at with some of the activity that they're doing. And then we've got other things about investment. I would love to get lots of whizzy things that tell me lots of things, but I can't because we haven't got any money. And I will stop saying that in a bit. But also for us is the non-digital users, so people who are slow to gain access are kind of and are coming online. And we need to always make sure we've factored in them to make sure we can deal with it. But there are massive opportunities, and this is why we've done a big focus really in terms of developing that connection over the last 6 years. Greater intelligence gathering, and I'll give some benefits of examples in shortly, but we get huge amounts of information that come in through social media. People will much more happily tell us things by a direct message or by a private message than they would do potentially to pick up the phone or to walk into a police station if they could find one that's open, because we haven't got any though. Anyway, but they're much happier to do kind of activities and do things that way. And they're getting more involved. So a lot of the time when we did the initial flow chart of how we would deal with criticism or issues, actually we don't have to, because there's a whole community of people out there now who step in and they'll have conversations, tagging us in, but between themselves. And we're quite comfortable with that. It saves us a lot of work if they want to have a conversation around something and we can step back. But it also, the key for us is to keep maximising the time on frontline. At the moment, we're just rolling out smartphones, finally, to the frontline officers. So the ability for them to be able to do all the paperwork stuff that they're going to have to do at the scene, but then they can also use social media, is just massive, because it means they don't have to go back to stations. And for us, as I say, there's big benefits in doing that, and it's also keeps that visibility that we've been struggling with. Increased understanding of communities, people are more happy to kind of raise issues that they've got, to highlight things that are going on, and in a positive way, not just a negative way. And also key again in all this is saving time and money. Massive benefits. So, these are some real examples. This was a guy who we posted as a wanted on one of the local Facebook pages, and he posted underneath it, "Catch me if you can." He was wanted on a recall to prison, which basically meant it didn't really matter. As long as we got him, he'd just be binned off back to prison. Helpfully, the local community was so hacked off with him that we found where he was, and he was within about 12 hours he'd been arrested and was back behind bars. So those are the real tangible results that we get. We had another one which always makes me laugh, which is a few months ago, which we posted as a wanted person on Facebook. And there was lots of conversations underneath the post about how ugly he was. And he got really upset and then decided to post a picture of himself to go, actually, I think the pictures are doing me a disservice. Look, I'm much nicer than that. which was really helpful because it helped the officers to identify exactly where he was. Um, so he got arrested as well. But those are things that are happening all the time. And we see sort of massive benefits to that, and people coming forward and helping with information, but also some of the criminals that we deal with are not the brightest, and that's helpful as well. But in all this, it's about developing the conversations. So when we started, we always wanted to make sure that we could keep the tone, quite kind of informal as much as we can, kind of show that these police officers are actually normal people, most of them, behind the uniform. And also then, keep that kind of level of conversation going. It's also a great way for us to share information in a crisis, and we do. And we've learned a lot from kind of previous experiences, particularly with the riots that we had, which are nowhere near as bad as London, but when we had those about 5 years ago, we got massive kind of benefits in terms of people coming forward with information and posting things for us. If we have anything happen now, you can guarantee there'll be so much information on social media. The challenge for us at the minute is about how we can kind of maximise that and capture that, and kind of we're looking at some of the systems that we can use for that. But it's also then, for me, is improving trust and confidence. People are only going to come forward with information, they're only going to kind of get engaged with the police if they can feel as that got trust and confidence. And again, for us, it's about a level of honesty. So, when we get things wrong, then we do own up to it, we do say, and we do make sure that social media is one of the ways we use it to make sure people can see that and know what we've said. And then above all that as well is the kind of contenty bit, which is about giving an insight into policing and what goes on. Key for me is understanding the audience. So we use the relevant stats that we can get, but it's also about knowing what people like. So we know, we just had we've just had a look at the statistics we've got. We know that the vast majority of people on Facebook will look at our sites between 7 and sort of 9 at night. If we're going to do any kind of online chats, that's generally when we do them, between sort of 6:30 and 9. And we target it as much as we can around the figures that we get. We also try and check why people won't connect with us on social media. So if they're just not interested, that's fine. But what we do is try and find a way to connect with them. And we do that through other kind of mechanisms. So we have neighbourhood surveys. Officers will go out and talk about it. Officers have been really good at pushing social media, so they also take on board when people don't want to use it. And then the other good thing is, obviously, because they're out and about in communities, they can pick up issues for us and make us aware if things aren't working. The other thing we do with all of this is we do a quarterly report. Going back to what I said about the evaluation element, we look at each of the 101 accounts on a quarterly basis. We can't do it any less than that because it's just too time-consuming. And we look at what's working and what's not working, and we try and find out why as much as we can. It's not an exact science, and we've always said that. But what it does is it shows us where things have worked, and it means that we can share with other accounts what's working, and so they can look at it. And, the 500 or so officers and staff that use social media for us are probably some of the most well-informed people in the organisation, because they get to know everything, because we have to keep them more informed, I think, than anybody. So they're like an extra arm of the comms team, and we have to keep going, make sure we've told them. They get everything before everybody else. But what it means they can do is they can tailor it for the kind of local communities. Maximising content, we're really big on that. We try and make sure we make as many opportunities as we can to get things out there, and also to take people with us. So we've done things like we've done bits of Periscope where we've tried to show people bits of policing where we can. We'll go on a patrol and take and use kind of social media to show what we're doing. We also take members of the community out, so they'll use that on their social media, what we call community reporters, and they talk about their shift for 5 or 6 hours and what they found and what they've experienced. And the first person we took out, she did 3 blogs on NetMums and reached a whole different audience for us. And within it said everything that we would have wanted to say about what the officers were doing and how hard they were working and the challenges and the difficulties. And the key in all this for us, though, is understanding the audience, is actually ask them what they want. So we do all kinds of bits, which I won't bore you with, where we try and look at kind of the reach we get, what information we've got coming back in. The key for me in all this is that we're actually getting stuff that the business can use, and information that's useful either directly to do with the crime or on a kind of general basis. And lots of that's just stuff that's available anyway through the analytics that you can get on the packages. And we try and use those more and more. When's the best time to post? what other information that, we can get. Are we not, are we reaching women of a certain age and men? Do we need to target things in a slightly different way? And because a lot of the information and the campaigns that we try and connect with people about now is around things like modern slavery and human trafficking, we're also looking at international links as well as what we can do through social media to kind of reach wider communities. And some police forces have actually got accounts that are in specific languages, so accounts for Romanian people or Czech people, because they want to try and get that level of conversation going. Content is king. Well, we do a huge amount. We just try and pump out as much as we can that is interesting, and if it's not, then we kind of recognise that we need to look differently. Loads of video. And we do Twitter chats and web chats. One of the things we have to be careful, though, going back to the vulnerability, is to make sure that when we do things like, we do a domestic abuse web chat, but we do it with victim support and kind of relevant charity groups, because people come forward as victims, which is one of the best things, which is one of the things we really, really want. But we have to do, that's why we have to adjust sometimes what we're doing and use different platforms and use different methods, so that we can make sure that we're not going to put people into a vulnerable position. So a lot of the times you'll find things that we post as well, we end up with, on the website, with a click here to click away quickly, because people in an abusive relationship need to be able to kind of look at the information and then get out of it really quickly. So we have to be aware of a number of different factors. But we do try and maximise it as much as we can. And the other thing, if we're ever struggling with dogs and horses, we had a new litter of puppies the other week. That always goes down well. I think that got extensively used on all the accounts, but people loved it, so that always works. The future for us is a changing one, because we're moving from this kind of base of the last 5-6 years of developing strong sort of engagement and conversations to now move towards service delivery. The key for us is around developing online services so that we can prevent calls into, non-urgent calls into the police. So we're redesigning the website to become more user-friendly in terms of self-service, and it's less about a communications tool and it's more about a service delivery. And there's some difficulties for us in that, some tensions in terms of making sure that we can maximise that. The key thing is, because we don't have a marketing department and because we haven't got like loads of people, we get involved in everything so you can make it happen in the way you want it to. Targeting new connections, new networks, that's another key for us, is to try and look at where people are and where we need to be. And we're doing some more work around buzz monitoring, where we are now, sort of 5 years on, to see whether that's changed or whether we need to look at where we are. Another really exciting bit, and that's not for me particularly, but the business is looking at, is predictive policing, using the social media information and analytics and stuff that we get back to be able to predict patterns of behaviour, to be able to predict things. It starts to get a bit creepy, I suppose. But actually, there's some massive benefits in being able to do that. And if anybody knows Data Miner, if anybody looked at Data Miner, we've got a trial of that at the minute, which is it's just an amazing piece of kit. You find out things, we can get involved in conversations that people are having when it's not in no way tagged, so that we could see it. So there's some big benefits, I think, is going forward into how we use that. And the other thing for us is we've got over 1 million sort of followers on different accounts and whatnot, and it's about rewarding them. So we try and make sure that we can give them as much as we can, that kind of extra, a little bit something different. When we started looking at the website, we asked them for the feedback first. We didn't, didn't go wide with it. So it's not easy because we don't have inducements that we can kind of keep that connectivity going. So we have to kind of look at ways of doing it, but we want to keep people coming back. And the key for that is trying to keep all those things interesting. And lively as we go along. And that's me in a nutshell. I don't know whether that was roughly on time.